The air in the boardroom is thick and cold. It smells like stale coffee and desperation. I am sitting across a polished mahogany table, my hands clasped tight, knuckles white. My husband, Mark, is there, his face a mask of practiced sympathy. Next to him sits Sarah, his associate. Her smile is a little too wide, her eyes too bright. They look like they've won something. I feel like I'm underwater. Every breath a struggle, every sound muffled. I can hear the tick-tock of the expensive clock on the wall, counting down to, what? Humiliation? Annihilation? The papers are spread out before us. Documents I've seen before, but never truly read, not with this awful clarity. They talk about assets, transitions, control. My name isn't on any of the crucial lines anymore. This is it. The culmination of months of whispers, late nights, and a gnawing dread I couldn't name. I want to scream. I want to flip the table. But I just sit here, a frozen statue in a room that feels like a tomb. If you've ever felt this way, like the world is shifting under your feet and you're about to fall, tell me in the comments. I read all of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was just a few years. Our life was comfortable, predictable. We had built something together. Our business. A small design firm that specialized in unique, high-end product packaging. Think luxury boxes, intricate labels, structures that made the product inside feel like a treasure before you even opened it. Mark had the vision, the charm, the salesmanship. I had the technical expertise, the eye for detail, the systems. I designed the processes, managed the licensing of our proprietary design methods and software interfaces, handled the complex vendor relationships, navigated the international regulations. Mark was the face, the handshake. I was the engine, the blueprint. We built it from nothing, late nights fueled by cold pizza and cheap coffee. Every success felt like a shared triumph. Every setback was something we faced side by side. I loved it. I loved the challenge, the creativity, the quiet hum of production, the smell of ink and paper. I loved building something tangible, something beautiful. And I loved building it with Mark. He was my partner, my best friend. We talked about expanding, about hiring more people, about the future. Our future. He had this idea for a new line of sustainable packaging, a revolutionary method using recycled materials that still looked and felt luxurious. It was brilliant. We poured everything into it. I spent months developing the specific process, refining the materials, securing the patents, and, critically, establishing the licensing framework for others to use the technique. The licensing rights were registered under my name. It just made sense at the time. I was the technical lead, the innovator behind the process. It was a detail we barely discussed, a formality. Or so I thought. Sarah came into the picture subtly. An ambitious new project manager. Young, sharp, efficient. Mark praised her work constantly. Said she had a knack for understanding his vision in a way no one else did. I didn't think anything of it. I was buried in the technical details of the new sustainable line, the licensing framework, the beta testing. My world was circuits and paper stress tests and legal documents. His world was meetings, presentations, lunches. Our paths diverged slightly, the way they do when a business grows, each partner focusing on their strengths. I was tired a lot, working long hours. He started working late too, traveling more for client meetings. He was stressed, he said. The new line was a lot of pressure. I tried to be supportive, cooked his favorite meals, made sure he got enough rest. Asked about his day. He'd give clipped answers. Distant. The first real crack wasn't a grand reveal. It was small. A voicemail I accidentally heard on his car's Bluetooth. Her voice. Low, intimate. Talking about a dinner, about missing him. My stomach dropped. It was a physical blow, unexpected and brutal. I confronted him that night. He denied it, of course. Said it was a client, a misunderstanding. His eyes shifted. He couldn't meet mine. The denial was weak, but I was desperate to believe him. I wanted to believe the man I loved, the man I built a life with, wasn't capable of that. I clung to his lies because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. But the seed of doubt had been planted. It began to sprout, a poisonous vine choking the air. Things didn't go back to normal. They couldn't. The distance grew. His late nights became the norm. His explanations thinner, more agitated. I started watching. Not actively, not like a spy at first. Just observing. Noticing the way he carefully kept his phone away from me. The sudden silences when I walked into a room. The way he flinched when I touched his arm. The cold space in the bed between us at night. My home, my marriage, became a place of quiet dread, a stage where we both pretended, poorly, that everything was fine. I was living with a stranger who wore my husband's face. And he was living a secret life I was terrified to fully uncover. The business, once our shared passion, became a battleground I didn't know I was fighting on. He started making decisions without consulting me. Small things at first. Changing a supplier. Hiring someone I didn't interview. Then bigger things. Committing to projects I hadn't costed out. He'd brush off my questions, say I was getting bogged down in details, that I needed to trust his vision. His vision. Not our vision anymore. And Sarah was always there. In the office, in the meetings, her presence a constant, irritating reminder of the unspoken truth. I watched them together. The easy laughter, the way they finished each other's sentences. It wasn't just an affair. It was a partnership. One that was replacing mine. The dread intensified. Sleep offered no escape. I'd wake up in the dead of night, heart pounding, the shape of my husband next to me a foreign presence. During the day, I'd go through the motions, managing my part of the business, while inside I was screaming. The office felt hostile. Colleagues who used to be friendly seemed hesitant, their eyes darting away when I approached. Whispers followed me down the hallway. I was becoming an outsider in my own life, my own company. I knew deep down they knew, or suspected. Everyone but me, it seemed, had already accepted the changing of the guard. I felt like the last one to realize the ship was sinking, everyone else already reaching for the lifeboats while I was still trying to fix a leak with duct tape and blind hope. I started looking. Not for confirmation of the affair anymore. I already knew that in the way you know the sun will rise, a certainty that hollows you out. I started looking for what else he was hiding. Financial records. Emails. Legal documents. I did it late at night, hunched over my laptop in the dark, the screen illuminating my face with a sickly blue glow. My hands shook as I navigated folders I wasn't supposed to access. It felt wrong, a betrayal of trust, but what trust was left? He had already shattered it. Then I found it, tucked away in a folder labeled Future Planning, Confidential. It wasn't just about the new sustainable line. It was about the entire business. Plans for restructuring. New leadership. Documents outlining a transfer of ownership. Not to me, not to a board, but to a holding company. And Sarah's name was all over it. Not just as a project manager, but as an executive, a partner in this new structure. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just an affair. It was a hostile takeover. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was stealing from me. Stealing our business. The one I poured my life into, the one I helped build brick by brick. He was handing it over to her. The shock was so profound, it felt like I had been physically struck. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled away from the desk, collapsing onto the floor, the cold wood pressing against my cheek. The betrayal was a physical pain, sharp and tearing. He was planning to cut me out completely. Take everything we built, everything I contributed, and give it to his mistress. The humiliation was crushing. I lay there for a long time, the darkness of the house pressing in, the only sound my own ragged breaths. I felt small, foolish, utterly destroyed. How could I have been so blind? How could he be so cruel? Days blurred into a fog of disbelief and despair. I went to work, played the part, smiled, attended meetings. But inside, I was a hollow shell, echoing with the sound of my own broken heart. I watched them, trying to find courage, trying to understand the depth of his deception. They moved with an easy confidence now, like the outcome was already decided. They talked about the future, their future, using language that subtly excluded me. They weren't hiding it anymore. They were just waiting for the right moment to deliver the final blow. I was a ghost haunting my own life. I thought about leaving, just walking away, cutting my losses, disappearing, starting over somewhere else. But the thought was like ash in my mouth. This wasn't just a job, it was a part of me. Years of my life, my energy, my expertise. And the unfairness of it burned hotter than the pain. Why should they get to walk away with everything, with my work, with my life? Because they were cruel and deceitful? Because I was too trusting? The idea of them succeeding on the back of my efforts, celebrating their victory in the space I helped create, was unbearable. It was like a physical sickness. I was sitting at my desk late one night, long after everyone else had gone home, the silence of the office amplifying the chaos in my head. I was reviewing the documents related to the new sustainable packaging line. The patents, the process specifications, the licensing agreements. My fingers traced the lines on the page, the technical jargon blurring into a meaningless mess. I felt lost, defeated. And then I saw it, a detail I had overlooked in my initial panic. The licensing rights. The rights to use the proprietary sustainable packaging process, the innovative technique that was the core of the new line, the one they were pinning their future on. They were registered. Legally. Securely. In my name. My breath hitched. I stared at the document, then back at the transfer papers I had found earlier. Their plan was to take the company the physical assets, the client list. But the most valuable asset, the intellectual property that made the new line possible, the very thing that would make the company attractive and profitable in the future. They couldn't use it without my permission. Not legally. Not without infringing on my registered rights. It was a technicality, a piece of paperwork filed months ago when I was just focused on protecting the innovation, never imagining I would need protection from the person standing next to me. It was my name on the line that mattered. My name, holding the key to their entire future plan. A cold calm settled over me, replacing the panic and despair. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something harder, sharper. It was knowledge. Knowledge was power. They thought they had outmaneuvered me, that I was naive and unsuspecting. They saw me as an obstacle to be removed, a piece of furniture to be discarded. But they had missed something fundamental. They had stolen the frame, but I still held the master key to the engine. Without the licensing rights, their revolutionary new sustainable packaging line was dead in the water. They couldn't implement it, couldn't sell it, couldn't market it without facing massive legal action. This wasn't just a loophole. It was a chasm. And they were about to step into it, completely unaware. The thought was terrifying, exhilarating. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my work, my worth. They wanted to erase me? Fine. But I would be the ghost who haunted their victory, the technicality that brought their empire crashing down before it even had a chance to be built. I carefully filed the documents back where I found them, erased my digital footprints, put on a performance worthy of an Oscar. I was the clueless wife, the soon-to-be displaced partner. I smiled, I nodded, I acted hurt but resigned. I let them think they were winning. Every patronizing look, every dismissive comment, was fuel. I wasn't just planning a defense anymore. I was planning an ambush. I spent the next few weeks building my case in silence. I consulted, discreetly, with a lawyer specializing in intellectual property and corporate law. I didn't reveal the full story, just hypothetical questions about licensing rights in the context of corporate ownership changes. I gathered every piece of documentation related to the licensing, ensuring I had original copies, digital backups, everything notarized and secured. I documented their moves, their meetings, their increasing control over the business assets. I built a fortress of paper, each document a brick, stacking them higher and higher until I felt invincible. During the day, I endured. I watched Mark and Sarah grow bolder, their secrecy replaced by an almost arrogant openness. They would talk about the transition, about streamlining operations, buzzwords that thinly veiled their intent. Sarah started issuing instructions to employees, bypassing me entirely. Mark would make passive-aggressive comments about my lack of adaptability or my emotional approach to business. They were chipping away at my position, trying to make me feel irrelevant, trying to isolate me. They were succeeding to a degree. The loneliness was crushing. The office, which had once felt like a second home, was now a minefield of knowing glances and hushed conversations. But beneath the performance of the wounded partner, a cold steel resolve was forming. Let them think they were pushing me out. Let them dig their own grave. I had the shovel. The day came. The meeting. The one in the cold boardroom. Mark had called it, his voice falsely casual. Just need to finalize a few things, tie up loose ends. That was me. I knew what this was. This was the formal announcement, the signing of the final papers that would make the transfer of ownership official, that would leave me with nothing. I walked in, my heart pounding like a drum, but my face serene. I wore a simple, dark dress, nothing flashy. I wanted to look composed, understated, like I was accepting my fate. Mark and Sarah were already there, radiating confidence. Sarah was dressed in a sharp, powerful suit, like she was already signing billion-dollar deals. Mark looked relaxed, almost relieved. He offered me coffee, his hand shaking slightly. Guilt? Or just nerves? I declined. Sat down. The papers were already spread out. They began to explain, Mark doing most of the talking, Sarah interjecting with technical jargon about synergy and optimizing value. It was all a carefully rehearsed performance, designed to sound like a smart business decision, a necessary evolution. They talked at me, not to me, as if I was a simpleton who couldn't grasp the complexity of their brilliant plan. The cruelty was breathtaking. They slid the key documents across the table. The ownership transfer agreement. The executive appointments, with Sarah's name prominently featured. The severance package offer for me. A pittance, an insult after years of my life's work. They expected me to sign, to just accept it. Mark looked at me, his gaze finally settling, a mixture of pity and impatience in his eyes. We think this is the best path forward, he said softly, the words like a betrayal in themselves. It's time for change. For the business. For us. The implication hung heavy in the air. This was the end of everything. The marriage, the business, my future as I had envisioned it. Sarah leaned forward, her smile tight. We've worked very hard on this transition, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We believe this new structure will unlock significant potential, especially with the new sustainable line. That was my cue. I looked at the papers again. Not with despair, but with a clinical detachment. I knew every clause, every number. I knew what was missing. I took a slow, steady breath. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, level. It didn't sound like my own. It's comprehensive, I said, my eyes meeting Mark's, then Sarah's. Their confident smiles didn't falter. Not yet. You've thought of everything. Mark nodded, encouraged. We tried to be fair, he murmured, gesturing at the pathetic severance offer. Fair. I let the word hang in the air for a moment, a small, sharp sound. Is that what you call this? Sarah's smile tightened further. It's a necessary business decision. Sometimes things don't work out the way we planned. No, I agreed, my gaze locking onto hers. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes. People forget crucial details. Their eyes flickered. The first hint of unease. I reached into my briefcase, slowly, deliberately. I pulled out a single folder. Not thick, but heavy with consequence. I placed it on the table, sliding it towards them. You've transferred the assets, I said, my voice gaining a quiet strength. You've transferred the leadership. You've even written me out of the company I helped build. But there's one thing you haven't accounted for. Mark frowned. What are you talking about? I tapped the folder. The new sustainable packaging line. The one you're basing your entire future growth on. The revolutionary process, the proprietary techniques. Sarah's eyes narrowed. What about it? You can't use it, I stated simply, matter-of-factly, like I was discussing the weather. The silence in the room was deafening. Mark stared at me, bewildered. Sarah leaned back slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. What do you mean, we can't use it? Mark asked, his voice higher than before. The licensing rights, I explained, my voice still quiet, conversational. To use the proprietary process, the one I developed, the one the patents are based on. They are registered. Legally. Securely. I opened the folder. Pulled out the top document. My name was highlighted. In my name, I finished. I watched their faces. The color drained from Mark's. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed into a furious glare. The confident facade crumbled, revealing the panic beneath. That's just a technicality, Sarah stammered, her voice losing its polished edge. A technicality? I echoed, a dry, humorless smile touching my lips. Without the license to use the process, your revolutionary sustainable line is just an idea. You can't produce it. You can't sell it. You can't even talk about it commercially without infringing on my rights. And the penalties for infringement, as your legal team will tell you, are substantial. I let them absorb it, the dawning horror in their eyes. They had been so focused on taking the visible assets, the physical structure of the business, they had overlooked the invisible, the intangible, the intellectual property that was the very heart of its future value. They had stolen the body, but I held the soul hostage. Mark finally found his voice. You can't do this. We're married. Are we? I asked, my voice turning colder than the air in the room. You were busy transferring our business to your mistress. When exactly were you planning on discussing the state of our marriage? He flinched as if I had slapped him. Sarah was staring at the document with a look of pure venom. You planned this, she hissed. No, I corrected her. I plan to protect my work. You plan to steal it. This is just the consequence. I explained calmly, clinically, what their options were. Without my license, the new line was worthless to them. They could try to fight it, but the documentation was airtight. I had ensured that. They could try to reverse the transfer, but the legal mess would be catastrophic, likely destroying the business anyway. Or, I said, leaning forward slightly, my voice dropping to a near whisper. You can negotiate with the license holder. Their eyes snapped up to mine. Hope warred with fury on their faces. What do you want? Mark choked out. I didn't want the business back. Not really. It was tainted now. It was built on lies and betrayal. I couldn't go back to that, not with him, not with her lurking in the background. But I wouldn't let them have it. I want what's fair, I said. I want the full market value of the licensing rights, assessed independently. I want a percentage of any future profits generated if you manage to negotiate a license for me. And I want a settlement for my share of the business, based on its pre-transfer value, before you started restructuring it. Their protests erupted, a desperate, angry chorus. It was too much. It was unfair. I was ruining them. You ruined yourselves, I said, standing up. I gathered my folder, sliding it back into my briefcase. You underestimated me. You thought I was just the quiet wife in the background. You thought I was disposable. I looked at Sarah, then back at Mark. You were wrong. I didn't wait for their response. I didn't need to. I had said what I needed to say. The power had shifted. The battle wasn't over. Not legally, but the crucial, devastating blow had been landed. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving them sitting there amidst the scattered papers of their failed coup, their faces pale and shocked. The air outside the room felt lighter, cooler. I had walked in feeling like a victim, heading to the slaughter. I walked out, victorious. The legal battles that followed were grueling, exhausting. They tried to fight, of course. They tried to discredit me, to claim the licensing was invalid, that I had somehow defrauded Mark. But the documents were ironclad. My meticulous records, the dated filings, the independent assessments of the process's value, It all stood up. Their case, built on deceit and a fundamental misunderstanding of what actually held the value in the business, crumbled. In the end, they had no choice but to settle. I got the full value of the licensing rights, a substantial sum that reflected the innovation's potential. I got a settlement for my share of the business assets. And I got freedom. Freedom from the lies, from the betrayal, from the toxic environment they had created. They didn't get the sustainable packaging line. Without the license, they had to scramble to find a less effective, less valuable alternative, setting them back years. The business survived, I think, but it never achieved the heights it could have. It was built on quicksand, and it never found stable ground. I didn't take over the business. I didn't want it. The money was enough. More than enough to start over. To build something new. Something cleaner. I used the settlement to fund my own venture, focusing on design innovation, but this time, keeping complete control. It was born out of pain and betrayal, but it was mine.
Truly mine.
Sometimes I think about that day in the boardroom. The cold air, the smell of fear, their faces as they realized their mistake. It wasn't a moment of pure triumph. There was sadness there too, a deep ache for the future that died, for the person I thought I married. But beneath the sadness, there was a quiet satisfaction. They tried to take everything. They thought I was weak. But they forgot that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones holding the blueprint, the ones who understand the foundation, the ones who register the rights. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.